今回は箸休め的な感じで、Linux のボス、リーナス・トーバルズのちょっと昔のインタビューをご紹介します。いつもでしたらそのまま翻訳するだけなのですけれど、今回は最初にどんなことを話しているかの内容を解説してから本編へ入ります。タイムスタンプをつけておきますので、必要ないお人は解説をスキップしてくださいね。いつものように私の台本をノートブック LM に読み込ませて、その挿絵を使います。それじゃあ、最後まで楽しんでいってね。さて、今回のお題は3つ。まず、マイクロソフトやアップルのことを、リーナスはどう思っているのか。2つ目は、デスクトップ Linux についての、彼の率直な感想。3つ目は、リーナスの素顔、汚いお部屋のご紹介です。では彼から見た、マイクロソフトについての感想ですけれども、アプリは優秀、モラルは最低、ということです。彼らしい、フラットな立場から、営利組織なんだから、そもそもそういうものだし、清廉潔白である必要なんてないし、って語っています。消費者サイドとしては、マイクロソフトは世界をより良くする存在であってほしい。だけれども、現実的に利潤を追い求める企業なんだから、そんなわけあるかよ、って感じです。もし、独善的に世界をより良くする存在になるならば、それはアップルになってしまうよ。しかもそれって、マイクロソフトより立ちが悪いよ、って言ってます。じゃあ、アップルに対してはどう見ているかというと、ジョブズの CEO としてのあり方を語っています。リーナス自身がボス的存在なので、CEO の役割なんて、みんな過大評価してるんだよ。実際はかなり限界がある。って言ってます。でもジョブズは例外で、よく言えば時代の変革者、でもリーナスから見たら興味なし、といったところ。このあたりのお話は、彼の自伝に詳細に書かれてたりします。次はデスクトップ市場のお話。サーバーとモバイル領域に関して、Linux は驚くべき成功を収めています。例えば Android では毎日90万台のアクティベーションがあるそう。現在だとこれがもっと増えているんでしょう。でもデスクトップ市場ではこれからもこのままでは普及しないと見ています。なぜならプリインストールされたマシンがそもそも普及していないから。誰も好んで Linux をインストールなんてしないと冷静でフラットな評価をしています。Linux を使う企業が出るみたいなところからプリインストールマシンを調達することはありますが、これは決して一般的ではないよね、とのこと。ですから、リーナスが期待しているのは、Google がリーナスのお家に勝手に送りつけてくる Chromebook だと言います。Android だって最初から普及したわけではありません。第4、第5世代になって Chromebook がブレイクスルーすることにかすかな期待を寄せているみたいです。後のお話は彼の汚いお部屋の紹介。確か現在はウォーキングマシンデスクは使ってなかったと思いますけれど、この頃のデスクは一時期話題になりましたよね。一人のお父さんとして夜型から朝型にならざるを得なかった全世界の個人事業主のお父様が感じてらっしゃる姿がそこにありました。新しいもの好きで古い機材はただのゴミ。なんですけれど、それは私たち普通の自作と一緒で、ハードディスクが山になっていく。眩しいのは嫌い。机の上はぐっちゃぐちゃ、ハードディスクの山、趣味のスキューバの機材が無造作に置いてある。リーナス・トーバルズという一人の人間は、フラットな感性と洞察眼、巨大なビジョン、普通のお父さんという三つの顔を持った一般人であることがよくわかります。それではここから、彼のインタビューを和訳したものをお送りいたします。
And Linus's personal view of Microsoft? It's typical of many hackers. By the way, OS means operating system.
I think that Microsoft does a fair amount of okay applications, and some of them are outstanding. On the other hand, I think from an OS perspective, they just suck. And from a morals perspective, they suck even more.
Why is that?
I just think that Microsoft isn't out there to make the world a better place. And maybe they shouldn't be out there to do that. But I think they've been concentrating a little bit too much on just making money.
The Linux operating system is a standard de facto for the service platforms, that's for sure. And even nowadays it's being used for some mobile devices and for many of network switches and so on. But it's never reached really an edge of being a competitor at the desktop level.
Right.
Why?
This is my personal failure point in Linux, that I started Linux as a desktop operating system, and it's the only area where Linux hasn't completely taken over. I mean, that just annoys the hell out of me. It's like, you said it has had some success in the mobile operating system. Google's last numbers were 900,000 new activations every day. That's not some success, right? Right? So the desktop is really hard, and I know why it's hard, and it's still annoying that the desktop is basically the last holdout. The reason the desktop is so hard to crack is most consumers do not want to install an operating system on their machine. And that's not desktop-centric. You don't want to install an operating system on your cell phone either, right? The reason Linux is successful on cell phones is not because you have 900,000 people downloading disk images and installing them on their cell phone every day. No, it's because it comes on the cell phone pre-installed. And that has never happened in the desktop market, and it's really hard to get it to happen. I mean, you get it, there have been companies that sell, like Dell, even in Finland, although I know they do it in the US, but I think they do it in Finland too, that especially if you're a big business and you want to run Linux, they will pre-install Linux on your desktop. But it's something where you have to specify that you want it, and they do it for a very limited portion of the machines they sell. So it's not something very common. And if you don't get the pre-installs, you're never going to get the desktop dominance. And will that ever happen? Right now, the biggest hope is projects like Google Chromebook. And I have a first-generation Chromebook, and the thing is slow and horrible. And when I get back home, I think I should have a second-generation Chromebook in the mail, just because for some odd reason Google sends me these things. So I will see. I know the hardware is so much better, so I'm no longer worried about the slow part. But this is something where I don't think you hit it on I know you don't hit it on the first generation. I don't think you hit it on the second. On the third generation, maybe. On the fourth, fifth, that's when we start talking. If you look at Android, it wasn't Android 1.0 that took off. So I'm hopeful that on the desktop it will happen, but the only way it happens is if we have pre-installs, and it's not there today.
I had actually a meeting with him close after I moved to the US, because that was when OS X was fairly new.
He asked you to join him? Stop selling water and just join him?
Basically, they said, hey, OS X is the future and it's Unix, come and work on it. And I said, are you going to change the kernel to Linux? And they, no, but we'd like you to work on BSD. And I said, yeah, whatever. I actually like a lot of things that Apple does. Mm-hmm. I think in other respects, what Apple does is worse than what Microsoft ever did. Mm-hmm. The whole control of the media and support infrastructure is kind of disconcerting. Mm-hmm. I think they're successful for a good reason. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I really don't know. I actually thought Apple was dying. I was clearly not the only one. Mm-hmm. And Steve Jobs clearly was a huge driver of their revival. Mm-hmm. And just having a person who was so respected inside of Apple and also had such a strong idea where to go and was able to actually push things through and make changes that they clearly needed. What situation Apple is in now, I don't know. I mean, they're in a pretty good market position. Maybe they don't need Steve anymore. On the other hand, the iPod was clearly what kind of revived them. And the iPod is losing its significance. They've done the iPhone. eventually the iPhone will lose its significance. I mean, already if you look at the coolest phones, a lot of them are Android. I'm not going to dismiss Apple, but do they need Jobs? I don't know. I actually don't think that leadership is necessarily all that important most of the time, and I say that as a technical lead person. And I think CEO positions are often over-revered. They're not really, it's not that they're not worth their pay, it's just that a CEO kind of person in most situations can only do so much. It's like quite often he's more a figurehead than anything else. And the success of a company often is about, can they execute? Can they get things right? And I think actually Steve Jobs and Apple is the rare example of a situation where the CEO really made a huge difference and actually made decisions about where the company should go that were huge. I'm sure he took credit for stuff that his staff really did, but he was really good at taking credit in that case, right?
So this is my working space. I've been using a walking desk for the last 3 or 4 months now. I'm not sure how much it does for me, but I'm sure it's healthier than just sitting down. I'm also trying to keep my desk clean, because if you pan over to my old desk, which I don't actually use anymore because it got so filled with crap, I don't know what to do about this anymore. I need to burn it down someday. I used to work night times, but then I got kids, and the kids go to school, and that means that we had to wake up at 7:30 or so to take the kids to school. It's not exactly a 9-to-5 job, but it is actually fairly close. And you can see that in the commit logs. It's interesting. I sometimes do statistics of which time zones people are and what time people are working at. And these days, you can definitely tell that a lot of people are actually keeping pretty regular hours. I'm not the only one with kids, clearly. It's set at a very slow speed. I call it my zombie shuffling desk, because if I put it at any faster than 1 mile an hour, my mouse movements get very erratic and I no longer can close my windows. I only have a web browser, which is how I read email, and a couple of terminal windows open, which is where I end up doing my Git pulls and any coding, although the coding part is not that common anymore. In between emails, I end up reading various tech sites and sometimes not so tech sites, depending on what's going on. I'm going to stop this because I'm having a hard time walking sideways. So this guy, I was actually really hoping that the kids would find interesting, because when I grew up, if I had had something like this, I would have been all over it. And my oldest has actually been using this for school projects and things like that. So it has gotten some use. I'd like to say that all this is prized possessions, but it's actually just garbage. I'm just not very emotional when it comes to technology, so old technology is just old and broken, and I'd much rather play with the new stuff. When I get new technology, which happens quite often, I don't want to throw the hard disks out. So I literally have this pile of hard disks that have accumulated over the last 15 years. I'm supposed to wipe them or use a hammer on them and then throw them out, but I'm just too lazy. Usually the view looks like this, because I don't want the sun to come in and disturb me. So this time of year, it's not as distracting, but in a couple of months, I will have that closed completely, because I do not want to see outside. And then you have various scuba equipment. There's 2 cameras there. There's a pair of scuba fins and my regulator in the other corner. For some reason, people keep sending me penguins. And we have a lot more than these, but we ended up basically giving away the duplicates. So these are mostly unique.